fs.read file. Okay, let's say it's a file. Hello, am I audible? Hi, good evening. Am I audible?
Yeah, hi, good evening, ma'am.
Yeah, hi, Raj. Yeah, thank you. Let's wait for 2 more minutes. Let's wait for others to join, and then we'll start with the MCQ.
Good evening, ma'am.
Hi, Dheeraj. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, yes, Dheeraj, go ahead. Was someone speaking anything? Okay. Good evening, Subhash. Yeah. Okay, I have added the MCQ for Tata. Yeah, added it for Baba batch as well. Easy one. If you have no practiced writing APIs in your CCs and assignments, this should be easy. Let me share my screen as well. Any doubts on last class? The last class was about uploading your files in Cloudinary, right? Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Yeah, thank you for confirming. So we saw how to add your images, and one other thing, someone asked me how do I upload the other different types of files, right? So I just referred Cloudinary document. So generally there were three types, right? One for the media, like one for the image, one for the video, and one other thing called raw. So basically they refer any other files other than images and video as a raw type. Okay, so you will have to mention the type of the file as a raw thing, and then you will have to upload. Else by default it is accepting only images, and that is the reason when I uploaded other different types, it was saying me that it is not a valid image, right? By default it is accepting only images. Okay, when you try to change the type of the document you are uploading, if it is a video, you will have to upload it as a video. Okay, else if it is any other different type, you will have to mention that it is a raw type, only then it will accept. Yeah, let me show you. Okay, yeah. Can you say here, see here, the resource type is set to auto if I'm uploading an Excel file or any other different type of file. Okay, if you know the type of the file, you can mention it, the type of the file, else go with auto. So it will accept all the other things. Okay, by default, it will accept only images. That's the reason we didn't get any errors when we were trying to upload images. But whereas, whereas if you wanted to upload any other different type of file, you will have to mention the type of the file, else it will throw you an error. If you can see here, image is the default resource type. Go with auto for everything else, like common if it is, you don't know the type of the file that is going to be uploaded, and if you wanted to accept all different types, go with auto. Yes, Abhishek, in companies, projects, no, no. This is for, if you go and see, okay, Abhishek is asking me in company projects or an industry, do they use Cloudinary or they go with database? Right, database, each company have their own database, right? Like if they are using any cloud databases like AWS, that is going to be fine. But database, they don't store files. Okay, each company have their own CDNs, okay, where they store these images, videos and all. None of the companies store, or none of, no, even in your sample projects, you don't store images and files in database. Okay, you store the URL of the URL where your images and videos are present. You store only the URL in the database. You don't store the raw. Please mute yourself. Yeah, thank you. You don't store the raw content of the file in the database. That is going to be really expensive, and your database is going to be loaded with data that is not required. You are not going to query the content of your files. Most probably you are not going to do it, right? Are you going to query the content of your files? No, it's going to be a static file which you display to the user. You upload or download, show it in the UI in most cases, right? You're not going to query the content, right? Databases are not used to store the raw content of your file. Okay, they use something similar kind of a Cloudinary platform, which is a cloud storage. Okay, and they have their, each company have their own CDN where they store all these static images or files, or anything given by the user in a separate CDN. Okay, and then they refer the URL. We have used Cloudinary. There are multiple storage platforms like this. Okay, and yeah, yes, any cloud storage they use, they will get the reference as a URL, and they store only the reference as the no, they store only the URL in the database and not the raw content. Okay, does that make sense, Abhishek? Yeah, okay. Yes, try uploading different files. You should be able to, okay, once you set auto, everything should work fine. Any other doubts on, uploading files in Cloudinary, not only in Cloudinary, how to get files from the users? Multer and Cloudinary packages are clear. Did you try any doubts? There are 24 here. Clear, everyone? Others?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mhm. Okay, on Saturday, we saw how to structure your project based on MVC pattern. This is the structure you will find in most of the in most of the node applications. Okay, how to structure, where to put what, how to have a separation. There are multiple things. They're connected with DB, there's UI files, there is the backend logic, application logic. Okay, so how to organize that in a structured manner, I have uploaded that, and you can also go and see the recordings. So many of you didn't attend, right? And we also saw how set immediate works. And before, to understand set immediate in a better way, you should first understand how event loop in Node.js itself works. It is a bit of complex thing to understand at this particular point in time. I still try to explain a few things. Okay, just go and see the topic which was discussed on Saturday. Okay, some might not make sense at this particular point in time because we haven't covered too much in Node. Okay, but if once you get experience and once you practice so much, develop projects, then if you come back and see visit the same thing, then it will make much more sense, right? How event loop works in JavaScript and in Node.js is something different. Not the working of it, but how it is being executed in Node is different. Okay, yeah, very important topic. Event loops, how internal working of the Node environment itself. Not many of you will give importance to this topic, because no, you are not dealing with it, right? Internally, your node is managing all these. We are not working with, and then we are not controlling how it is being executed and all. But most of them will not pay attention to this. If you were able to tell all these in interviews, like, you will definitely stand out. Okay, so all the common topics, all the topics which we you see, everyone will be, they are working on the files. They might have done some samples, so they would definitely know. Okay, like if 100 people attend, at least 70 of them like know the major topics, right? If the topics which are important, and at the same time how it's internally working, if you are clear with all those, you will definitely stand out. So I have also linked an article in the reading materials, where you have a series of how node itself is working, right? Like internal working of the node. Like I think like it's about 6 to 7 series of posts, medium link by the Pal, I believe. Yeah, just read that if you get time. Okay, yes. Mm. And I have also linked Node.js interview questions in Saturday's class. Okay, go through that as well. Let me know if you have any queries. It's a GitHub repository where they have linked all the important Node.js interview questions. Okay, so no doubts. Can we proceed with today's class? Yes.
Yeah, ma'am.
3 days of no sessions. Okay, let me bring the notepad. Okay. So today's topic, we are going to see about what authorization and authentication is. Okay, how to implement authorization is mostly on application logic, how you implement for each of your applications. But authentication is something very common. Okay, how we will see how to do that using sessions like today, and tomorrow we will see how to implement it using express session in a very detailed manner. Okay, and then on Wednesday we will see how to do authentication using JSON web tokens, that is JWT. Okay, these are going to be the criteria, the agenda for the next 3 days. Okay, we are going to concentrate on authorization, know the difference between these two, but mostly on authentication. Is that clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Can we proceed, others? Bhushan, any doubts before proceeding?
No, ma'am.
No?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Let's start. Like any application, if you go, okay, the first thing you have to do is to log in, right? The very first thing you will have to do is to log in. Else you can see few informations without login itself, right? Like for example, this guides the document doesn't require me to log in and I don't need to log in and authenticate myself. It's a public information. But if I have to upload some content, right, the very first thing I was doing is to create an account and log in. Why is that necessary? Why logging in to an application is necessary? A general question, right?
Sir, server need to know the who access the data.
Yes, Swapnil, correct. Like Sudhakar also, like, can come again?
Authentication means like someone having giving details and Like if I'm doing something extra, so it will be saved to the database of.
Correct. Like who is actually using my application? The server needs to know that, right? If if I'm using the application, it should say that Jaitan is accessing the application. Right? If Sadakar or Abhishek or anyone else is using, the server should be able to identify that who is using my application. Right? So without identifying, if the same operation is being allowed without logging in, without, let's say, the Cloudinary platform itself, right? So if you don't log in and if you are allowed to upload images without even logging in, every user who is trying to upload some media will land up in this page. He or she can delete whatever images you have uploaded, right? Without there is no uh, information about who is accessing my application, right? So yes, Abhishek, to store the data of a particular user and server should know who's using the application. Yes, exactly, correct. Logging in, okay, gives the information like who is using the application. The applicant. Basically, you can say verification or identification of the user will be more appropriate. Identification of the user. Okay, this
verification goes to authentication, right?
Yes. Authentication, first you verify and then identify the user, right? You verify the username and the password and then you identify the user. Right. So this entire process comes into the term called authentication. Is that clear? Like who is actually accessing my application, right? If you take the Ateneo portal, okay, if I log in, I am logging in as, Jaiton, and I am accessing the application. And if you people are accessing the application, each one have to log in and then only you will be allowed to, mark the attendance or view some details, right? Without logging in, you cannot do. Okay, so basically, Ateneo server needs who is marking the attendance, right? Basically, the identity of who is actually using my application, right? Identification of the user, whoever is using. Yes, Bhushan, security. One thing is identification. The other thing is to secure your application. That's the first thing. I don't want everyone to access my application without any identity. Right? I want to give access to my application only to the set of users who are my customers and not to anyone else. Thereby, you ensure that your application is secure. Is this part clear?
Yes, ma'am, clear.
Okay. Next term is the authorization. Okay. Let's take the Ateneo portal itself. Okay. I am logging in. Okay. I view a dashboard. Okay. And let's say Manjot is logging in. Okay. He's viewing the dashboard. Both users are authenticated, right? Like I have a username and password, right? Username and password. And then I view the dashboard. Similarly, Amanjot will also be doing the same. Like he'll be giving his username and password to access the application, right? But are these two dashboards, let's say this is the dashboard, same?
No.
No, like major difference would be I am logging in as an instructor.
Yeah.
Okay, whereas Amanjot is logging in as a student, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Correct. So I have I have certain things to do. I can add MCQs, right? I can upload CC, right? These operations are not allowed to Amanjot even though he or she is a username, is an authenticated user. He is still an authenticated user. Like he has given the username and password. He's still an authenticated user, but he will not be able to add MCQs or upload CC. That's not possible, right? Whereas, a Manjot, on his dashboard, I think like you can mark attendance, right? I cannot mark the attendance. Correct. Like, what are the other things you can upload your answers, CC answers in
Yes.
portal?
You can ask questions.
And
Yeah.
we can give feedback.
Yes, feedback, all those, right? Like that and all, I cannot do, right? So this, because I'm allowed to do all these operations because I am authenticated user, and at the same time I am logging in as an instructor. Okay. Here, Manjot is a student. Like both are entirely different, even though both are authenticated users, right? So authorization, if you go to the first term here, authorization simply means, who can do what, like, things you can do according to who you are. Yes, Rupam, correct, right? If I am an instructor, I can do these set of operations. If I am a student, I can do these set of operations. And this highly depends on the application itself, right? Let us say I am going to let me say, let's consider Amazon, right? There must be some users who are sellers, right? Sellers, and we are customers, right? In sellers profile, they will have an option to add products and all, whereas we don't have that option, right? You need to register yourself as a seller and then add, right? So only sellers can do these certain operations, and there can be some other users called admin. They can basically control anything in the application, right? Even in our thing, okay, there should be something, someone who's known as admin, right? And let's not take admin also, let's take a teaching assistant, like Lalita, Manish and all is there, right? Let's say TAs. Okay, they will have a different portal. Okay, they can access your marks, or I think even I can do, but they should have something specific to their dashboards, right? Or teaching, they can clear your doubts. Your mentors can have a separate dashboard where they can answer your doubts. I cannot do that, right? I cannot see the questions, or I cannot see the add answers to your doubts. Mentors should have a separate platform, like separate dashboard where they can add answers to your questions, right? And there should be some no admin profile who controls or who associates a batch to the instructors, right? There should be someone who's, let's say, admin. So there are multiple batches in Atenu, Tata and Baba. There are multiple other batches as well, okay? But I will be able to access only Tata and Baba, right? I don't have access to other batches. Okay, that is set by the admin. Admin is the one who assigns batches to me, right? So that operation, assigning batches to instructor. So this operation, which is specific to admin, that I cannot do, right? So there is a separation of who can do what. Okay, even though everyone are authenticated users, there is a separation of which user or which authenticated user can perform which operation. Okay, it highly depends on the application logic. Based on application to application, it differs. Okay, basically a set of rules. Okay, yeah, yes, Abhishek, correct. Everyone can have authentication, but everyone has a different authorization with a different base of rules. Yes, correct, correct, correct. Authorization is a process done after authentication, right? Yes, Rupa. The first criteria is the authentication. right? This should be the first one. Username and password should be the first one, right? Who is first actually accessing my application is the first process I'll have to do. Authentication is the first one. Then with that authenticated user, what are the operations allowed to that user? That is the second validation you do. Correct. Abhishek and Rupam, correct. So this performing authorization, okay, performing authorization. Authorization, as I told, depends on the use case of the applications, like which set of operations I should allow to which set of people. Okay, on a very high level, okay, this authorization is done in two ways, right? One is the role-based authentication. Sorry, role-based authorization. And attribute-based authorization. Yeah, you can have for on a very high level. I'm telling you again, it depends on the implementation of your application, how you wanted to authorize, like you can decide. But on a very high level, on a very common use case would be to do it based on rules, okay, and to do is based on attributes based authorization. Okay, what is role based authorization? Okay, let's come to the first part, role based. I already told you an example. There should be some table or something in the DB which says Jaitun is instructor. Okay. Another Rupam is a student. Right. So there should be another entry table for instructor. Like these are the operations that I can allow. So basically, add add MCQs, upload CC. These are the operations that should be allowed for an instructor. Similarly, for the student, giving feedbacks, right? Set of operations which are allowed to the student must be stored somewhere. Okay, this is one way of implementing it, right? But this on a very high level, if you see, it is based on the rules. Let's take an e-commerce application like Amazon or Flipkart. They might have, it's not necessary that one should have only one role, right? Let's take Flipkart or Amazon. Okay, let's say there is a user XYZ who is a seller and who's also a customer, right? He can add products at the same time with the same account itself. He can still buy the products, right? Do you agree with me on that? It's not necessary that I'll have to add only one role to a user. I can add multiple roles to the user. Right. But if you take, if Bhushan is logging into Amazon, if he is not logged in as a seller, he should have only customer role. He will be able to only purchase items from Amazon and not to add products there, unless and until you enroll for that. Right? So this is role-based system. So based authenticated users are assigned specific roles. Okay, however your application is designed, whatever roles you want your application to have. Okay, based on that, you have certain set of roles associated with your ID. Okay, and you will be allowed to perform only the set of operations allowed for that role. Is role based authorization clear?
Clear, ma'am.
Clear, everyone? Yes. Okay.
Clear.
Yeah, Nilesh, Pradeep, Reena. Okay. Next, coming to attribute-based authorization. Okay. Now, Let's take an example of my Ateneo portal itself, right? I am an instructor, right? I can do, I can add MCQs. I can add, upload CC. Let's say these are the specific operations to, for an instructor. Okay. Now, if you see here, I can add MCQs, but I can add MCQs only to Tata and Baba batch, right?
Yeah, ma'am.
I don't have access to some XYZ batch. Right? There are multiple other batches in Athene. I have an access to this particular feature. I'm authorized, right? I'm still authorized to do MCQs, right? Like upload the CCs or add MCQs. But I cannot do other than, Tata batch, Baba batch, right? Other than these two batches, I cannot upload to any other batches. Okay, so whenever this operation is being made, add MCQ is being made, an internal check should be done in the application backend, to check if the batch, right? If the batch is any one of them, right? If the batch is not equal to, okay, I simply reject, right? I simply don't allow, I simply don't allow this instructor to upload MCQs for any other batches. So are we not doing authorization based on a particular attribute or a particular data, even though the feature as a whole is still, I am still authorized to do, I'm still depending on a particular attribute or a particular data in the entry to make it authorized, right? To make that particular feature authorized. Okay, let's take your example. You guys can add feedback, right? You can add feedback, okay, only to the sessions you attended, and also only to our batch, right? Only if you are from Tata batch or Baba batch, you will be able to give feedback for this particular session. Correct. If you are, if you cannot give feedback, okay, to any other batch. Correct. So basically, when you give feedback, an internal check should be done based on whether if you are enrolled in Tata batch, it should check that if the student dot batch is Tata, and then only give allow feedback. No, on a very what to say, like, still I am authorized to add MCQs, but even that is, I am authorized based on some specific rules or some specific data, based on the attributes. And still, I cannot add MCQs to all the batches. Still, I'm restricted to add only few data there, right? Let's take your college portals, your college or your school portals, right? There'll be someone who's a teacher, right? He can still add, he or she can still add marks to his class, right? He cannot go and add marks to, if he or she is a teacher of class 8, he cannot go and add marks to, class 9. That's not possible. I'm using a attribute or, data specific authorization here. And understood what authorization is?
Yes, ma'am. Clear, ma'am.
Yeah, others? Subhash, Sudhakar.
Yeah, ma'am. Clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Rupam has sent. Restrict access to particular characteristic is attribute based, and restricting access to some parts is role based. Not exactly, but based on the role, I'm still allowed to do certain set of operations or certain set of actions as a whole. Okay, even those actions, I am still restricted based on the data of that thing. Partially correct. Yeah. by role-based authentication, I can still do MCQs, but that authorization itself depends on the data of my, whatever. If you are adding MCQ, it depends on where you are adding that MCQ or for which batch you are doing it. I'm still authorized based on attribute here and also based on roles here. Roles and attributes I am being authorized, right? Sometimes you need not, do role based itself. Like, only attribute based is enough. But still, mostly you will be first validated based on roles in big applications and all. And then based on roles, you will be, again authorized based on your attributes. There is no framework or there is no standard to perform authorization and all. It entirely depends on how you want your application to be built. What are the use cases for your application, right? There is no framework there's one framework or there's one library which suits for all applications. I don't know how I wanted to design the authorization here, right? There is no one specific route, right? But you need to have a structure or design accordingly that you perform all these and then allow only the operations allowed for the authenticated user, else don't use it. Before authorization, first they have to be authenticated. That's the very first point. Okay, every authenticated user are only allowed to perform any operations in the application. Is that clear? Is authorization part clear? Any doubts? Srinivas?
No doubt, ma'am.
Okay. Swapnil? Okay. Shiva? Okay, nice. Got it. Let's go to authentication. Let's go to authentication. As I said, every user, you should first verify his or her identity, right? Who is actually using my application, right? Who is the person who is accessing my application? You should verify the identity of the user, okay? So the very first thing is logging in, okay? The user gives username or email ID, let's take username and password, right? Based on this two data, right? You identify his or her credentials with the values you already have in your DB and then allow them to log in. Okay. So this is what on a very high level it is happening. You give few data for your server to identify you. That data can be anything, like generally it's username and password. Okay. And in today's you have this two-way authentication, where you give the any code or any notifications in your phone and then you are authenticated. But generally username and password are used, right? So this is the very first step. Like before performing this step, if let's say you wanted to let's say I wanted to add MCQs, right? So if this request is being sent to the server, okay, a HTTP request is being sent to the server, okay, and if the server comes to know that I am not authenticated, right? I'm not authenticated, it simply rejects, right? If it's not authenticated, if I'm not authenticated, it simply rejects my request. I'm not allowed to do MCQs. Like I'm not allowed to add MCQs. Right. Similarly, any operation which requires users to be authenticated will not be allowed before your login operation. Correct? So let's say first time the user logged in. Okay, let's say this is the client. Okay, here you have client, your browser. Okay, and let's say this is the server. Okay, and through internet. Okay, very first time you send a request to log in, right? So as I told, HTTP requests are stateless, right? So each request you send to the server will be a new request only. Is that part clear? Like, let's say for the first time, if I send login, okay, let's say this is R1. Let's say I'm trying to log in again. Okay, let's say I'm sending a second request. Okay, second request login, right? Your server has no idea on your previous request. So the server, your HTTP request will be treated as a separate different request only. Both are not same, even though the endpoint, even though the HTTP method are same. Every request, every HTTP request you send from your browser is treated to be a separate request only. Okay, is that point clear? Every request, even though they are same endpoint, same URL, everything is treated as a separate request only. There is no state maintained in your server to know that that it is already been sent. So treat both of these requests as the same request and simply ignore it. No, HTTP requests are stateless. Every request is treated as a new request only. Okay, so first time I logged in. Okay, now the user told like, okay, the username and password is correct. Okay, you can do whatever in your application. Okay, so let's say you send a request to fetch, a list of users in the, no, not list of users. Let's say it's a Facebook application. Let's say you wanted to fetch all the posts, right? So this is a different request, right? Login was a different request, and getting the fetch, getting all the posts from the server is a different request. So do you think server should again get the login details in every request? Like for every request the client sent, do you think that the username and the password should be sent for every request? And for every request the user to, let's say for login, it is going to get the data from DB, right? The username and the email. It will validate, okay, correct, go back, right? That's all. If in the post, do you think like again it will go to, you will have to send the username and password for every request? Again, it will have to go to DB, check if whether you are authenticated or not. Again, make a call to post DB. Let's say this is a login DB and this is post DB, right? Ideally same DB, but different tables, right? So let's say again, go and fetch the post. Do you think like for every request, this process should be repeated?
No.
No, right? So you don't want, load the server with simply authenticating the user's request every time, right? You don't want to perform DB operations. As I told, anything you get from the DB is going to be very expensive, right? Performing backend logics are okay, right? Whenever you are going to access DB, you should make sure that it is actually necessary, right? It's actually required to access the DB, only then you make a call. Okay, that is the reason we have cache and all. Okay, if you know about Redis cache, mem cache and all. Okay, accessing DB is much expensive, much slower than accessing in-memory storage or any cache, right? It is time consuming. So you will have to be very careful. Whenever you wanted to access DB, you should first make sure if it's actually necessary, and then only you touch the DB, else you don't, right? And yeah, so this is, you see the problem here, right? HTTP requests are stateless, so every request are treated as a new request. So if every request are treated as a new request, you ideally have to authenticate the user on every request. That you will have to do. You will have to check if the user is authenticated or not on every request. But how you do is something going to be different. Okay, for now we were accessing the DB and checking every time. So this is something difficult, or not difficult, this is something very expensive, time consuming process. You don't want to do authenticate in this way, right? Simply going and checking the DB for every request the user sends is not something advised, right? So how are we going to do this authentication if I need to avoid this process, right? Like for every new request you get from the client, I want to avoid this process of fetching the data from the DB and doing it every time. So there are two ways how you authenticate a user. One is session based authentication, and the other is not JWT, token based authentication. Okay, this is mostly JSON web tokens. Okay, so these are the two ways, okay, two commonly used ways to authenticate an user, okay, simply by avoiding this particular step, right? Simply to go and check every time the DB, okay, I am going to check the token in the second place, whereas in the first thing I am going to check the session ID and the session data, right? So we are going to concentrate on this part only today. Okay, is the general explanation clear? What's the problem we are facing and what are the types that we are going to solve this? Understood the problem here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so that's important. Like why we will have to use session or token when we have a data in our DB, simply validate and do the request, right? Like that's the first thing that we will think about. But understanding the problem and then know what are the solution, to clear that problem will make more sense. Any doubts on what's the problem we are facing here? Okay, is the theory part of what authorization and authentication clear? Okay. Okay, let us add one MCQ and then I will explain what session-based authentication is. That's again a little part of theory. Okay, we'll see how it is going to work, and then we will tomorrow we are going to see express sessions, but we will try to integrate the basic part alone today. Okay, so let me go add MCQ and added MCQ for Baba batch. Added it for Tata batch as well. After you answer, I'll give you one interview question. Like everything, it's not like, these are the set of questions that if you will be asked in the interview, no, it doesn't work that way. Okay. So there might be variations of important topics. You will be asked theory, you will be asked to code. You cannot stick with one set of it's no, it's not just a book of questions and then you can refer and can give the no and then give the interview. No, it will not work that way. Okay. Based on the interviewer, he or she can frame his or her own interview questions, ask any theory parts, or go with the very important one. Okay, so this is based on objects, right? I'll tell you one. Let us say you have a object, calculator or whatever you wanted to call it. Okay, you have a method attached to it. Okay, dot add is a method. Okay, let's say you want to add 5 initially. Okay, and then again you have this one, with the response of add you just multiply it 2, right? With that you just subtract 1. With that you just divide by 2 again. So how the operation should be, so it's initially 0. Okay, 0 plus 5 is 5, and with that you multiply 2, so it becomes 10, and with that you subtract 1, so that becomes 9, and with that you divide by 2, and then that becomes 4.5. Correct? So it's a chaining of methods. Okay, try and I'm not going to discuss the solution now. This chaining of methods will be asked mostly, right? This is one example. Okay, similar to how you do chaining of array methods. If you remember, you do map, you do filter, everything with a response, right? So similarly, try to implement this. Okay, ideally it should return some object called result, and this result should have a variable where I can log in result dot total, right? Or anything which shows the actual answers, right? You can name it as result object, and in that object you can have this answer. Is the question clear?
Clear, man.
Clear. The question is clear, right? So yeah, try to implement it. I'll tell you the answer after today's session if time permits, else we will discuss on the extra process. Okay, I'm not going to give the solution. Think about it. Think about the solution. I'll give you a day, like, or whenever time permits, we can discuss. This is easy, right? Are you finding any difficulties? Okay, think about it. Not necessary now. Do it now. Okay, go for a break. Come back by 10:03. Is that fine?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. By the time others go for a break, if you have any doubts, you can still discuss on the way.
Ma'am,
Yes.
callback function, one time explain, please.
Next function?
Callback.
Callback function in what? Like
in JavaScript.
in generally callback function, is it?
Yes.
Okay. So callback functions are nothing but, let's say, what example can I consider? Okay. So this is a callback function. Do you agree with me that? So there must be, okay, I'll explain you what callback method is. There must be a function, okay, in app object, right, in Express, right? There must be a function get, right? Function get, right? So this get function, this is the URL you wanted to do that, right? So let's say the first parameter is the URL. You got the URL, okay, as a parameter, a simple string, right? This is a simple string. So what this get function should be doing internally on a very high level is to make a, since this is an express, or let's say, okay, so let's say in the incoming request is /products, right? So there should be some mapping with this URL, or let me not confuse with this one. Let us take the fetch one. Fetch in JavaScript, you know, right? You simply give the URL, and I think like you give, it's a promise, right? Dot then, and then you give anything here. You give a callback function to dot then, right? So this fetch should be internally, what it's doing is making a API call, right? If there is a function fetch, right? And you get the URL, it's making an API call, right? API call. But this, you don't know when it will occur, like when the API call will be ended, right? So you will have certain set of operations to do after the API call is done, after the API call is completed.
Okay.
You don't know when to call them, right? You don't know when I should call. You don't know when this product should be called. Only when the user hits the products/products URL, that is the time you will have to call this. But before that, in programming, while programming, do you know when you should call this? You don't know, right? Only when the user hits /products, you will know that is the time I'll have to call this function. Else I don't touch this function unless the user hits /products, right?
Okay.
So what you do is simply wrap whatever you wanted to do when the user hits /products. You simply wrap it in a function and then give as an argument, similar to how you pass as a string or a number, right? Similar to that, you wrap all whatever you wanted to do when the user is hitting /products in a function and then pass it as an argument. Okay, similar to how you pass any other string. So let's assume you are getting that function here. Okay, callback function. Okay, this is a function. Okay, this is the entire function which you are getting. Ideally, in fetch, let's say instead of a promise, you are getting a function, whatever you wanted to do after this, after you got the result of this API. You don't know when you will get, but you know what I should do when I get the result, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So you wrap all the content, whatever you wanted to do after the URL is being fetched in a function, you wrap them in a function and then pass it to this function. So now this fetch function, after calling, after the URL, after the API call is finished, now this fetch function will know when I should call this function, right? Basically, you are giving this fetch function the entire,
Control.
control of when to execute the function instead of you calling it manually.
Okay.
Right? You know when to fetch, right? You know when to fetch. So whenever you wanted to fetch, you simply call this fetch function. But you don't know when you should execute the, when your API results will come and when you should execute, when you should process the result. That will take some time, and only your fetch has the control of what is happening, right? Only your fetch knows when the result is being arrived. Okay, and at that particular, after the URL result is being fetched, at that particular point, it will simply call this function. This is a function, right? So if you are naming it as a callback, it will simply, call this function. This is a function, right? So you simply call it like this. You can name it anyhow.
Okay, ma'am. Yeah, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's it's giving the responsibility of calling the function to another function itself.
Okay.
Got it? And you are passing it as a parameter. So you're passing it as an argument, similar to how you pass strings and numbers. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Is everyone back?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes,
Can
ma'am.
you just add a thumbs up? Everyone, I think like 28 are here.
Thumbs up या Coca-Cola, ma'am?
What did you ask, Swapna? Coca-Cola.
Nothing, ma'am. Kind of joke.
Oh, I didn't get it. Okay. Can you just add a thumbs up, guys? Like others also? Only one I can see. Okay, okay. Now I got it. Thank you. Thumbs up or Coca-Cola? Okay, got it. Okay, it's 10:05. Let's start with sessions. Okay, now I told you that session based is one way, right? So let's see what's the process of this session based authentication. Okay, and let's see how it's going to work. Let's say this is client. Okay, and this is your server. Okay, and you are sending, okay, let's say you are sending a login request. Okay, login. Okay, you give the username and password whenever you log in. Okay, so this is the very first operation if you wanted to do it, right? Yeah, so if you wanted to do any operation in the website, the first thing you should do is login. Correct. So the first time you have a username and a password and you give to the user, right? You give that to the server to authenticate yourself, right? So in the server, very first time, okay, it should definitely hit a database, right? DB, and it should fetch the username and password. Check it with whatever you gave. Okay, we check it with the username and the password with whatever you gave, and then send you a validation request, right? Click and then send you a response that you are validated, right? So next time when the user is sending any request, you should not repeat this process. Okay, you should not repeat this process. Is that clear? Okay, what is a okay, so you should do something in your first request. Okay, you should save some data, or you should do any process. Let's say it's be it session based or token based, any process should be done for the first time, so that when the let's say this is R1, so that when the user sends R2, you ideally use the data which you have in the first request, and then simply avoid this. In the second process, you simply don't fetch the D. Okay, you need to do some process in the first request itself. When the user is trying to log in for the very first time, you should do some process here, so that when the user sends the second request, you simply don't fetch the results from the DB. Is that part clear? Is the objective clear? We need to do something in the first request. Correct? Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. So in the first request, what can we do and how can we use that in the second request is the entire objective here. Okay. So let's say first time you are first you are checking the username. Username is equal to DB value. Okay. Whatever the value is from the user, and password is again the password from DB. Yes, from DB. If it is equal, if this is true, you need to store some data. Okay, how your session based is going to work is, okay, it will simply store your user data. Okay, it will simply store a session. It will create a session. Okay, where it is stored, where this session is being stored, that we will discuss later part. It will create a session, okay, with a unique ID. Okay, a session ID, just a random unique ID. Okay, and then you have the data. Let's say you wanted to have the user email ID alone. Okay, you don't store sensitive data and on session. Obviously, you don't need it. You just need to know whether they are authenticated or not. right? In the second request, what you need to know? You need to know whether the user is authenticated or not. I am not bothered about user's password and all. Okay, you will also need user ID because you wanted to know who the user is every time. So again, you don't want to fetch the DB. So on a very general case, you will need user ID. Yeah, you can have any
Ma'am,
data here. Yes.
when session can start, ma'am? When session can start?
When I'm going to create a session when the user is fetching for the login only, right? I'm going to create a session. Yes, the very first time, very first request. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, I'll complete later. We'll come to that part. Okay. Okay, so whenever the very first request, okay, with the login part, okay, you simply validate, get the data from DB, and if it is true, you are going to create a session. Okay, this session you can store it in memory. By memory, I mean, like, just when the server stops, all data in your memory will be gone, right? When the server stops. How we store all other variables. Right, similar to that, you can store it in memory, but this is not how it is done in production. Okay, there will be again a separate space in DB where you store or DB or caching. Okay, you can store it in Redis cache. Okay, generally the people store it in cache, all this session IDs and all. Okay, so we will see how to implement this and all when we see databases, but for now we will stick with memory. Okay, somewhere this session is being stored with the unique ID. Okay, a unique ID and all the data you wanted about the user, any data be it. Okay, just make sure you're not storing the password in the session, not necessary. Okay, a session will be created in the server, some data, okay, and a unique ID associated with that data. Okay, and you simply send this unique ID, right? This unique ID, right? You send it as a response. In the response, you will say it's valid, and then you will send this unique ID as well. This is just a session ID. Okay, a unique identifier which has users data, which says that the user is validated, and you simply send this user ID to the client. Okay, where will you attach this unique ID? You will simply set it as a cookie. Did we learn about cookie?
Yes.
Yes, it has a size of 4 KB and it is this session based session ID and all. You are attaching this unique ID with your cookie and then sending it in client. You will have a cookie, right? You will have a cookie. So this session ID, this unique ID or session ID, whatever you name it as, will be stored in the cookie. This cookie will have the session ID. Is that clear what's happening in the very first time? I'll simply fetch the data from my database. I will create a session, a small data about the user itself, with similar to how you store key value pairs, right? A unique ID, okay, which will be stored in the session, and you can have any data there, okay, whatever data you needed to store about the user, generally user ID, or any other data you wanted to store. Let's say, you can also store the roles, right? Like what are the roles associated with the user, so you don't need to fetch the roles again and again on every request. Yeah, any data you wanted to store for that particular session, okay, you store it in a space. Okay, we will see how to store it in memory by default, and then later when we know about DB and cache and all, we will see how to store this session into a cache. Okay, and then you send this unique ID to in the response itself. Okay, and you will attach it as a cookie, and then your client will store this session ID inside the cookies. Is that part clear? Is the process happening in your first request clear?
Clear, ma'am.
Everyone? Okay, let's see what is happening in the second request. Okay, you have this session ID, right? So every browser, okay, even if you don't send cookie data by manually in JavaScript, even if you don't do that operation, every browser will attach all the details, right? This R2 will be R2 plus cookie. Here also R1 will be R1 plus cookie. So initially, let's say you don't have any cookie, then it will not be there. But every request, okay, no, for in every request, your browser will attach all data in your cookies along with the request and then only send it to your server. Okay, so in my R2 request, I will have this session ID. So what the server will have to do now is, so this is a second request, R2. Okay, this is R1, process happening in R1. In R1, what it will do is, it will simply go and check. You will have the session ID in cookie. In cookie, you will have the session ID, right? Okay, your R2 request before doing whatever operation, let's say before going and fetching the post, let's say the user is asking for the post data. Before going and fetching the post data, it should first check whether the user is authenticated or not. I don't want to fetch the DB this time because that is an expensive process. Now I have the session ID in the cookie. Okay, before fetching the post, let's say this is the post DB which contains all the posts. Right? Before doing this is the second step. Okay, before doing this step, the very first step is going to be check this session ID. Go and check, like if it is in memory, go and check if this unique ID is present. Okay, if present, okay, simply go and do the second step. Get the fetch post and then get the data about the post and then return it. Because I have a session being maintained by this, if the unique ID is being present in the session, I'm damn sure that he or she is authenticated user, right? So if it is not present in the session, okay, if not present, you simply give a response. You don't go and do this operation. You simply right away send the response, right? Like not authenticated, or redirect to the login page. Anything you can do. Okay, if it is an API, okay, if it's an API, you simply send it's not authenticated. If it is an application, like web application, if the user is interacting, you simply redirect them to the login page saying your session is not present. So please go and log in first and then come back to me. Is the process clear? What's happening in R1 and R2? So as Swapnil, was it you who asked it out? Okay, someone asked recently, like when the session will be started, right? Like when it will be, you can end it, you can destroy a session wherever you wanted in the client, in your server, you can destroy it, right? So you can create a session when the user is logging in, okay, and then maintain it till the server is, stopped. If it is an in memory, if the server is stopped, your session will be destroyed. Okay, if it is stored in DB or cache, mostly in cache, your session will be stored in cache because you can easily easily and also access fast, this unique ID you can access fast in cache compared to DB. Okay, if it is stored there, you can simply add session and you can delete and destroy whenever you want it to be. Okay, even if the server is stopped and start, you still have the sessions maintained. But if the server itself has gone down, mostly the unique IDs and all will be changed. You don't want to maintain the same unique ID every time. So every time the user logins, okay, in the session, a new unique ID should be created. Okay, so the session will be started, or the data in the sessions will be valid when the user is trying to log in. You can destroy it whenever you want, right? Let's say you sense something going wrong, you figure out in the server that there is some doubts about who's authenticating the system. You have the access, right? In the server only, we are storing the user session, correct? We are storing the user ID and the user data in the server side, either in memory or cache. I don't bother about that. But I have these data in the server, right? In the server side. If I sense something suspicious about the user's activity, I can simply go and remove this session ID itself. So next time, even though he or she is authenticated, due to some suspicious activity, from the backend, you have invalidated, basically removed this session. So again, he or she, the user will be asked for the username and password. Is the process clear? What's happening in response now, request 1 and request 2? How your session based is working? I'll also show you some sample of how it's working in websites. Let's go to Flipkart, or where will you go and access your cookie data? If you go to applications, you simply have the storage, local storage and session storage. Okay, you have cookies here. So if you see here, can you see session token, session time ID, session ID? Can you see all these session tokens?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So these are the informations that your, if you see here, I'm already logged in, right? So these are the informations that your Amazon server is sending to your client. Session details, session ID. You can just assume this session ID to be what I told. So if you see here, your Amazon web server is having my data, okay, so, mapped to this unique ID. A session ID is sent. So second time, if I go and ask for make any order, go and visit the cart, okay, you need not add them to your request every time. Okay, your browser will do it by default for you in your headers. It will by default attach. Okay, for every request you go to, what happened? Okay, for every request you go to amazon.in, your cookie data will be added in the header by default. I don't think if you can see here. Yeah, can you see here cookie data? I didn't know, even if you develop the application, okay, go and check cookie data by default. Anything you see, everything you see in the cookies, okay, everything by default will be sent to the Amazon server in your header. Your browser will do that for you. Is the workflow of session based authentication clear? How to
Yes,
add
ma'am.
it in cookie, how to how I told you how to send it. You don't need to do anything. Obviously, every cookie data, it will be sent to you, like sent to the server. Okay, whereas how to send it in the response as a cookie, we will see that. Understood the flow here. Let me add an MCQ, just go through what's happening. Like, try to understand the flow here. If you cannot understand any part of it, I'll add MCQ by that time. What happened? I have added the MCQ to Tata batch for Tata batch, and I have did it for the Baba batch as well. Not something we have discussed in the class, but still, try to browse if you can. Like basically, we haven't seen that in the class. It's not get data from the file, it's to get information about the file. Okay, Rupam, server sent only the session ID to the client, which client store it in cookie, and we can destroy it as well. Yes, server can do that. Even the client can destroy. No, I can simply go and if I go to the application and simply select all these, not letting me to delete. So, probably let me try to delete all these session based details. Okay. If I try to, again, it's giving delete. Okay. Probably they are holding some other details as well in session. But yeah, you can go and delete a cookie here, right? The client also can do, the server also can delete that session. You don't store any user related data. You don't store any user related data in the unique ID, right? It is just a unique random string, a combination of random strings and characters which you have generated in the server, and for the reference of the client you have sent the unique ID only. So even if this session, if the attacker comes to know about the session ID and you come to know, the server comes to know there is some suspicious activity, you can simply destroy this session. Okay, even though he or she has this unique ID, there is no information attached to this unique ID. It's not encoded with some data and all. No, if the user tries to decode that, he'll get some user data. No, that is not going to happen because this is just a random string. Once you know about JWT, that is token based authentication, I'll tell you where to use, which one, what's the difference between these two. Before everyone were, I don't know why this notepad is not working for me. Let me quit and open again. I'm not able to do anything with this. Okay. Uh, Okay, can we go to how to implement this part in our code? Let's go back to our Visual Studio Code. Yeah, so let this be here. Let me revert all this. So let's have this. Let's have this, no problem. Okay. I'll show you in day 8 itself. So we have, let me show you all the modifications I did. I did nothing in the app.js. It's simply the user's information, right? So just, it will get all the users from the DB, and based on user ID, it will add users. It will, allow to edit user and delete it. Okay, nothing complex. And I have a simple web page which has two fields, one to add the username and one to add the password and a login page. I haven't used this anywhere. Okay, later I'll make it as a separate folder and have it here, but for now this will work. Okay, now if you see here, anyone can add user. Anyone, let me start the server. Okay, let me start the server. Go back to our Postman or anything else. 8081 / users. Okay, I'm getting the data here, right? I can add any data, like if it's a post, anyone can do this, right? I have no authentication in my API. Whoever has access, whoever can get this localhost port number, they can do all these operations, right? All the put, post, and edit, right? So now let us try to put some validation or authentication system here using the session based authentication. The very first thing, so if you see here, you need to set, cookie, you need to start a session. There is tons of things involved here, similar to how, these are all common operations which is present in all the applications, right? So all the operations like this, all common operations, definitely you will have some very frequently used package. You don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? You don't want to keep on implementing what everyone has done and it's already famous and most of the applications are doing. You can simply use that instead of reinventing the wheel, right? So from Express, go to your npm. Okay, to maintain session based authentication, there is a popular library called Express Session. Okay, if you can see here, simple session middleware for Express. Okay, go inside that. If you can see the number of downloads and it's pretty popular. Okay, we can use this. So I am going to simply do npm I express session. Can every one of you do that in your application, like whatever you have it? Even if you don't have this APIs, no problem. Just simply add a simple sample request and then send some random data. Installed everyone, express session it is. Okay, let me go back. If you have installed, okay, they'll give you all the things whichever you needed to do. How you import all other packages, right? Like all other third-party packages, you simply import express session as well, the first line. Okay, we are not going to see in depth tomorrow. It's still a continuation of express session alone. I'll just know how to get started alone. We will see today. Okay, just install them, have it as const. Okay, install them, import that session. Okay, now what you'll have to do is in older applications, one other thing you'll have to notice, you will see something called cookie parser middleware. Okay, everywhere you see this library being used, you will generally see cookie parser middleware. But since this version has come out, like it's no longer needed, right? Cookie parser is something used to read and write cookies from your request. Now your express session itself is doing that for you, so you need not use this cookie parser middleware to do it separately. Okay, from this version they have it will be always changing. You cannot learn one thing, stick to that and apply your lifelong. No, it's not going to work that way. Okay, technology and the way some things are being implemented will change frequently, so you will have to know the updated information. Okay, you will see in most applications that cookie parts are being used, but now your express session itself will do that for you, reading and writing cookies in your request and response, right? I told you I'll have to attach the unique session ID, which I have here, to the response. And in the second request, I need to read my cookie data from the request, right? So this process is being done by the cookie parser initially. Now it's been replaced. Like this library itself is doing that for you. Okay, let's go back. Let's go down. Okay, similar to how you add options and all, right? Like similar to how you did for Cloudinary, right? You did some configuration, right? Whenever you instantiate it, like similarly, you will have to do that for your cookie session as well. Okay, what you need to do is session syntax. Yeah, accepts. Okay. Go down. I should see. Okay, you should add it as a middleware. This is a middleware, right? So as I told you in the description of the library package, it is a middleware. So how do you add middleware? Similar to how you added the other ones, right? So just simply use app.use and then use this package, call this function. Inside that, yes, if someone was asking anything.
Where we are using app.set.
App.set is not used for middlewares. Okay, it's not used to add middlewares. Whenever you have middlewares, you use, right? Set is used to, for example, one thing which we saw is to set your partials, right? View engine. It is just a key value pair, right? Like if you see here, it is just a setting kind of a thing where it is a key and values, right? Your middlewares are not key value pairs. These are functions. Okay, so if you wanted to use middlewares, you always end up using app.use only.
Ma'am,
right?
in middleware, we need to validate all the stages. In all stages, we need to validate.
Yeah, you are going to initiate this session middleware, okay, to all the requests. Like for every request, you need to access this session, right? You need to, for any request the user sends, you need to access the data from the session, right? I need to get, let's
before access, before access, it must be and validate.
Yes, before actually logging in, right? Yeah, before actually it will be empty. I'll show you the difference, how it is before validating and how it is after validating. I'll console log and show you the data which is there in the session. It will be empty, so you will check that if it is empty. So the first time when the user gets in, login, okay, you will go and I think like you are asking, like, why do I need to add the session middleware in the login when I am not going to access and when I'm not going to get the data from the session, right? Is that your question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so yes, good question. I'm not going to access the session data. Okay, on the first request, but I'll have to store the data in the session, right? Still, I'll have to access the session. When I create a unique ID on the first request, I need to write data in the session, right? You don't
Ma'am,
read
is kind of
data.
temporary storage.
Yes, as I told you, now we will see how to store it in memory, how to store the session data by default. By default, this is a memory storage. Let me go and show you memory storage. Yeah. Default session storage memory. And if you can see here, not designed for production, right? In memory storing sessions is not used in production applications. By default, it's memory. When the server stops, everything in the session will go away. I cannot persist that because it's in memory, right? Any data you have, let's say you have user mark data, when the user, whenever you add something to user, whenever you add or edit, delete, all these are in memory, right? If I stop the server, all the data is gone, right? So for now, we will use in memory only default, understand the behavior of session storage, and then we will try to modify this in memory storage to a cache or DB later when we know that topic. Understood why I am adding a global middleware? Even though I don't use it to log in, I still need to access the session to write the data. Okay. Is that clear? Okay, let's continue.
Yes, ma'am, clear.
Yeah, I have added the middleware. Now I can configure a few options. Okay, the very first one is to add a secret. Okay, this can be any string. Okay, why are we using it? If you see here, this express session, okay, in the cookie, it will not only send the session ID, okay, it will also do some encryption with the secret which you have given and then send that ID. You will still have the session ID there. I'll show you how the session ID looks, okay, in the cookie and in our application, how the session ID looks. But let's now I'll also show you how the data which is present in the cookies. Okay, it will not only send the session ID, along with the session ID, it will do something with your secret key and then send that ID to your client. Okay, this is an implementation with specific to express session middleware. Okay, that is how the express session have implemented. Instead of sending the unique ID alone to the server, okay, instead of sending the unique ID alone, they are using some encryption which with the data which the server alone knows. Okay, your server alone knows this data, your client doesn't know, right? So it can be any string. Okay, let us have it this way only. Any random string you can give, and this is specific to your express session. Okay, nothing to do with session based authentication. Each library will have their own implementations, right? Okay, so this is the first one. And there's one other thing. Yeah, this is the secret. Okay, cookie secure. I think like cookie, this is not mandatory, right? You can just skip cookie. Okay, let's set the timer. If you are going to send a cookie to the response, you don't want the client to save the cookie for like lifetime. No, you don't want to do that. You wanted to have some timings where the client should store. If it has crossed that timing, your browser should automatically delete that cookie, right? So you need to send the it's not like mandatory, but it is the best practice. Okay, you need to send the max age, meaning like for how much of a duration this cookie should be maintained in the client. Okay, this is not a mandatory but a better practice. So how do you, this will accept values in milliseconds? Yes, milliseconds. So what is 1 second? Let's say I wanted to add the maximum age to 1 day. Okay, yes, Rupam, after that it will destroy, your client itself will destroy after 1 day. Your client itself will, your browser, okay, by client I mean your browser itself will have the maximum age attached to it, and then after 1 day your browser itself will do that for you, will basically destroy this cookie information, whichever the session ID information, whichever it has. Okay, So this is not mandatory. It is a basic, good practice to follow. Okay, it's accepting in milliseconds. So 1 second is 1000 milliseconds. So if I wanted to do it for 1 day, what I need to do into 60 is 60 minutes. Okay, sorry, 60 seconds into again 60 and into 24, right? 24 hours. Is it correct? Do they have? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So some milliseconds. 1 second into 60. I think one more 60 should come. 60 seconds, 60 minutes, and then into 24. Yeah, correct. Okay. So 1 milliseconds, whatever you wanted to have, you can add it here. Okay. I have added it for 1 day. Is that clear? Okay. So this is a secret and a cookie like age, which you wanted to set it up. Again, if you go back, you have multiple configurations. We will see in depth, know all the needed ones later, but I think one other thing is also mandatory. Let me go to resave. Yeah. Okay. If you can see here, default is true, but the default has been deprecated. I'll tell you what resave is tomorrow. Okay. But we will see how to get started with the session and how to access it. And let's have it as true. Okay. Others are not mandatory. Secure, yes, I'll tell you all these tomorrow. Like, let's see the basic working of sessions. And if you, I think like here it's not necessary. I think it should be added to the cookie, I believe. Cookie secure, right? I remember in that way only. Yeah. Path, max age, all these are added to cookies itself. Okay, that and all we will see, all the configurations, what each one of them mean, we'll see tomorrow. Okay, so now these are the initial configurations which you can set to your sessions itself. This secret is important. Okay, as per the implementation of express sessions. Now let me go and have a view, okay, a login page. Okay, a login page. So simply when the user is trying to access my application, an empty URL, I'll simply send request response. Okay, I'll just send response dot send file and path dot slash views slash index. Okay, is this fine? Like what I have done here? Let's. Okay. So very first page, if the user is not giving any URL, I'm just sending the login page. Right, inside views, I have this index.html, which is a simple login page, which I have. By the time it installs, let me /app.js. Yes, these are not deprecated. It is again expecting to save and initialize. Don't worry about this. I'll tell you tomorrow. False would be the better option. Yeah. Again, it's a deprecated value only, nothing mandatory thing. Let us go back and try to hit localhost. Path. Okay, absolute path. Okay. It's asking me the entire path, so I will have to add the directory name. Okay, it's in, okay, now let's, okay, a simple login page. Okay, nothing complex here. So if I try to give any username and password, right, it should do a post call, right? So let us go back. I have made this method to be post and the URL is /login. This understood, right? How to configure to be a post call. So I need to add a separate route for the login alone. Okay, let's go back. Add dot, it's a post call, right? It's a post call /login. Okay, so request response. Where will you get the username and password? How will I get username and password? What is the name here? Username, right? And that is the same variable I will be getting. Request dot, where will I get the data, guys?
Body.
Body, right? So body. So yeah. So after, let's print and see if I'm getting username, comma, password. Okay. Now, if I try to log in, okay, I haven't sent the response, so it's still loading, but it's undefined. What is the other thing we will have to do? App.use express dot,
JSON.
no, not JSON. It's URL encoded, right?
URL encoded.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, because it's a form data. Now, if I try to log in, okay, I got the data here, username and password. Okay, I'm getting the data. We are done with the initial setup. So now, what you will have to do in the first request, get the data from the DB, right? So that is the first operation we will have to do. Now I don't have DB. Let me add a comment from DB. Okay. Let's assume that data to be user DB username. Okay. Let's assume that should be 123@gmail.com, at g.com or something. That is what I have saved in. Okay. Let's no, I'm just adding a hard coded value, DB password. Okay, let's assume this to be 123. Okay, I'm not going to use, this is not nowhere it's going to be present in our application. This is the value I fetched from the DB. Okay, I'm just hard coding that value. So what you need to do is, I'll first have to check if the username which I got from the request is equal to DB username which I got from the DB, and okay, password is equal to DB password. Then I will have to write data to my session, right? Write data to my session. Else, I'll simply send response dot send invalid user name or password. Is this process clear? What we are doing here is the place where I will have to write. Let's assume this is R1, the first request which I told you. After the user is validated from the DB, okay, I will have to store some data in my session. A unique ID has to be generated in the session, which is an in-memory session as of now. Okay, some data, a unique ID in the session I have to store. Okay, that is the second process, right? And then simply send that unique ID inside the cookie and as a response. Okay, so how to do is, inside your request, you have something called session. Can you see session and session ID? Okay, we are going to create a session. So we are going to write data. I have already created. Here I have already created. I'm going to write data to a session. So simply use dot session. Okay, dot dot what data I wanted to use. Like I told you, in this process, okay, I can create a unique ID that and all my express session package will do that for me. I don't need to worry about that ID and all. What data I wanted to store, right? That you can add it here. Let's say I wanted to store username alone. Username, okay. User ID, okay. I'm going to store it with this name and then username. And let's say I wanted to store a Boolean thing called is logged in. Any information you can store, whatever you wanted to store in session, you can do. Okay, you can store roles here. Okay, anything you wanted to be common across for all the requests, you can store that. Okay, is logged in. Let's say it's true, a Boolean value. These are the informations that I need to store it for this particular unique ID. Unique ID generation and all, you need not worry about it. Okay, now I have written some data in my session. Okay, can we just try to print what this session is having before writing something data and after writing the data? Console.log. Now I'm just writing print request.session. Give me a minute. I'll just show you the writing alone and we will end today's class. Okay, so if it is invalid, I have just written, understood what we have done here, simply validating the data from the DB, and I am writing some data to the session. Okay, what data I wanted to. Okay, and we are seeing the difference alone. Okay, now if we go back to my login, 1, 2, 3 is correct. Let's give an invalid password first. Understood this part? It's not correct with the value which I have in the hard-coded values. So it's giving me an error. Let's go back and give the value which I have. This one, right? And then 1, 2, 3. Now, if we haven't sent the response, so it's still loading. But if you can see here, the session, okay. Okay. Can you see? Okay, this is... I have given as a response. Give me a minute. We have made a mistake. Can you see the difference? This is the session before and this is the session after writing the data. Can you see a cookie and you have the time when it expires, the maximum age, that is 1 day, which we have given, right? The path and all, I'll tell you later what this HTTP true means and all, right? Yes, yeah, thank you, Rupam, for, he has already sent the error here, which I have made. Okay, but this is the session which I have. So internally, your Express session has an ID to it, and to that ID, it is having this data. And additionally, I am also adding few data to it. User ID and is logged. Okay, I'm just adding content to my session. Okay, and then let us say, okay, after the user is logged in, generally you will redirect them to your home page, right? That is what you will do, correct? You will redirect them to your home page. So instead of I don't have a home page now. Probably instead of a response of redirecting to the home page, I'm going to call the users method. This is a function where you will use to redirect to some other page, right? When the user has logged in, you want to redirect them to your home page. Okay, now I don't have any HTML to do the home page. Sorry, I can redirect them to the users get call. Will that work? If the user is authenticated, I simply wanted to show all the users in my system. I'm just redirecting it to this URL. Is this line understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, these are the only changes I have done. Now, if you go back, let me go, reload. 1, 2, 3, login. Now I'm able to see users. I'm redirecting it. But let me go to application, cookies. Can you see this? Let me delete all this. This is I did for no demo purpose. Go back. Okay. Now, Can you see a session after I logged in, a session ID being maintained? Right? This is the ID which your server, your Express session, since I have some sessions added, this session, this ID, right? The session ID is being sent. All that your Express server is doing for you, you no need to do that all. But by default, it is sending you the ID, right? This is the unique session ID which I was talking about. So internally, this data, right? This entire data is mapped to that ID which I showed you. This ID. Is this part clear? Okay, I haven't done anything. We haven't validated and all. For now, we have seen only the first part, the initial login part. I'll repeat what I have done here. Simply, I have a login form. Okay, I am importing the Express session. I am configuring it with a secret ID, secret, and the maximum age. These two I will tell you afterwards. Okay, tomorrow what each one of them mean, but I'm just instantiating and then creating a session. Okay, on the initial login, I am validating with my dummy DB data and then writing few data. Okay, I'm not creating unique ID and all that initial process, adding the unique ID, fetching the ID from the request, sending it back to the response. All these common operations, your Express session will do it for you. You simply need to add whatever data you wanted to add. Okay, and then I'm redirecting it to users as of now, as I don't have any home page to my application. I'm redirecting to this URL. Okay, but in the back, in my browser, you can see a cookie being sent. So this is the session ID. Tomorrow I'll show you how I can view the session ID in the browser. It's in the backend itself. Okay, understood how to write? Is this part clear? Any doubts on the R1 part? This alone. Any doubts, guys? I'll add MCQ. Sorry for taking 3 more minutes. Yeah. 3 MCQs done, right? Only one more? Okay. Today's agenda is just to explain what your session, how the workflow of your session-based authentication is, difference between authorization and authentication. That's clear. It's okay. Tomorrow we will see more about Express session. I've added the MCQ for Tata batch. Any doubts? Did you try the interview question which I asked you? Do any one of you have any guesses on how to implement? If you have any idea, you can share of how to implement that, else no work. And let me know tomorrow. Added MCQ for Baba batch as well. This keyword, yes, ideally you need to use this keyword. But yeah, come up with entire object. I'll repeat, you can see the question again here. This is the question, okay? Have an object and attach few methods to the object, but it can be applied by chaining the object, right? So what you return from these methods are important. So work on that. Let me know if you have any clarifications. Tomorrow we can see. Is the question part clear? Do anyone want me to repeat? Okay, created attendance for Baba batch. If you have any doubts, let me know. And I have also linked reading materials. Let me see if I have linked that. On Thursday's class, I did add few of them about authorization, authentication and all. I'll add that. I haven't linked based on this session and all express session. I'll add that to that. So basically this site will help you to get started. Let me show you. So this is a beginner friendly article, how to use sessions in Express environment. I'll link this article in the reading modules. You can go through that. Okay. Any other doubts, guys? Function, returning function. But I'm not calling the function, I'm calling the function with a parameter. Yeah, think about write code and come, like, no, implement it and come. There are multiple ways to do it. Like, yeah, what's the best way? We will have to know, see it, and then bring the trade-off. Just implement, try to work on that. You already know plain JavaScript, how to work with objects, you know, how to add methods, you know. What are the different ways of returning from the methods? Everything you know, just try to combine all of these and then try to implement it. Okay, for those of you who are leaving, good night. If you have any doubts, let me know. I'm adding reading materials. Parag, good question. How can we set username and password dynamically instead of hard coding? Yes. Whenever your user is signing up to your application, he will give you basic information, right? His name, like the email ID, what the password he or she wants to set to that account, right? Whenever he's logging into your application, before logging in, he or she has to sign up, right? So you will have that information in the backend. You will store that in your database. You will store the username and not the direct password, some encrypted way of password, right, in the database. So later when the user is trying to log in, you will go and find the in the database which you have already stored, get the username and the password, and then validate with the user who is trying to log in, right? So that is how you get dynamically, right? So for now we have hard coded. This value will come from our database. Yeah, once we try to learn databases, the very first table we will be setting up is the login table. Okay, I'll show you how to get the data from there. Probably by mid of next week we will start a database, right? For like today till Wednesday you have authentication. I will be on leave on Thursday. So I am not sure if we have classes by other instructors, or if I am not still sure about that. Okay, if it is, it will going to be extended and we have class on Friday, and then next week we have 2 sessions, how to deploy your application in Heroku and all that, right? So, and after knowing the backend logic, and then we integrate it, we learn about databases, MongoDB starting, and then SQL, and then it goes that way. Any doubts, Sudhakar? Sudhakar has been silent so far. What happened? Srinivas, Saurabh, Subhash, clear. Backend guys
Yeah,
can
ma'am.
see the user's password if I have my account or backend. No, that doesn't work, right? You simply don't have access just because you're developing the applications. You don't have access in big product-based companies where we mostly trust, right? Accessing live data is, is not allowed for everyone. If you are going to access no. If you are going to access live data, you will have to get a special permission from your manager, and that is how it works. Even if you wanted to access live data, you don't have access to the database of live data directly. You can access the live site only for issue no purpose, but even that, mostly people will monitor whenever a separate session will be created whenever you are accessing a special environment itself. Okay, a Windows based application, or a separate computer itself will be getting generated, and everything you do inside that will be recorded, right? It's not that easy. Just because I'm a backend guy, you cannot access that and all. Yes, in few startups it is still possible. Yes, I agree with you. They don't have that much of an control and security in the data. It is still exposed to the developers, but yeah, it's all in the paperwork. You still have, no, you are still questionable if you misuse the data.
But they can see now. Ma'am, I heard that password and username, they hash the password and username.
Yes,
So,
yes. We don't store the password directly in the DB. Okay. None of the companies do. Okay. You have some encryption algorithm to encode the password and then store it in DB. Even if you have access to the DB, without knowing the encryption algorithm, you will not be able to get that data. Does that answer your question? Or?
yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I recently heard that the two-factor authentication is also got hacked. So that's why I
One
started
way,
reading.
yes, yes, correct. Like one way, in one side, developers are building the application, and one side, there are hackers learning to hack, learning to exploit your application in a good way, so that developers are still, every company have a separate team. Generally, most of the companies I have worked with have a separate team to just by voluntary means explore. There's a red team and a blue team where they hack your applications. So in turn, instead of exposing others to report your issues, internally a team will be working to hack the applications with the
Yes,
company
ma'am, like
itself developed.
hackathon or something.
Yes, yeah, sometimes they have it as a hackathon, but every company have a security team where continuously they'll be trying to hack the applications, right? So that they monitor their issues far early than someone else exploit their system.
Okay, ma'am, like app tester and like
Not
something.
testing is different. Testing is based on the testing the entire feature without any issues, right? But doing some manipulations and how the request is being sent, how to read the data, that and all testers will not do. Going deep into networking and all testers will not do, right? They'll test the working of the application, but security is still a separate domain in itself, right? It's a huge thing. Right? There are multiple things. I am not that much knowledgeable, and I have not detailed information about the network security part, but that itself is a huge domain. Like hackers do multiple things, like they try to get in the cookie data. They do cross site. You have multiple tabs. For example, I have a tab, I have an Ateneo tab. Okay, and by if you log in your bank applications and all, they'll open it in a separate window. Have you noted that?
Yes, ma'am.
They'll not even open in a separate tab, because in the window you can still access. There is a possibility to access even though it's a backing site. Let's say some XYZ site you open, right, in a separate tab. That XYZ site will still be able to access the cookies that your bank site sends, okay, by some process, right? There is a steps to access that as well. That's still possible. So better way is to open a separate window itself, because communication between two windows in a browser is not that easy. Okay, whatever we do from one side, from the developer's guide, there is going to be someone who is exploring to hack that. Okay, so only if both of the teams put in all the effort so that the other team doesn't hack our system, okay, that much authenticated it is. Yes, as you said, even the two-factor authentication, it's being done, right? Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, Rupam, correct. If hackers are not attacking our system, how will we develop our encryption? How will we develop our security? We will not be improving. If the hackers were not, exploiting, we would have stopped with username and email authentication itself, right? I could simply store it in the database. Why should I hash it, right? As and when they exploit our system, we try to develop a more secured way of handling the data. Right? Yeah. Okay. Any other doubts? Amanjot, Rupam, Subhash. Okay, guys. Let's see tomorrow. Let's learn about express session tomorrow. Okay. Good night. Bye.
Good night, ma'am.
Good night.